have no idea why the Dodgers would do this to offend all of us. And they seen the outcry, and yet they even apologized to the drag organization, but they didn't mention no apologies to the Catholics or Christians. That's very telling.
We begin this hour in Los Angeles. Thousands of Christians gathering last night to protest anti-Catholic drag nuns during Pride Night at Dodger Stadium.
The event honoring the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, who are heavily criticized for their anti-faith messaging, with a Community Hero Award.
Perpetual Indulgence for their outstanding service to the LGBTQ+ community. Sister Unity and Sisters Lydia.
Protesters saying they felt disappointed by the Dodgers, who chose to side with the drag group over the families.
Yeah. So what's the payoff there? You mentioned that video happened about an hour before the game. So not many people saw it except on social media where it went. Yet the Dodger, here you have the public address announcer there saying we're giving an award to Sister Dominia and Sister Unity. Not a lot of unity coming out of this for anybody.
So you ask what's the payoff for the Dodgers? You know, and in the 6 o'clock hour, we talked about the fact that, truthfully, you know, as impactful as it is to boycott Bud Light or Target, this type of attitude in corporate America is everywhere. It is in almost every Fortune 500 corporation. The real question is why. And if we can get to the why, then we can see what the impact of a boycott may be. To me, there's a couple of things. It's not that the corporations are chock full of true believers. There are true believers in corporations, but it's not that every CEO believes in honoring the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. I believe it's a couple of things. You know, it's ESG. That's the Wall Street investment arm of affecting social policy. That, you know, if you want your stock to go up because you want big institutional investors to buy your stock, you better satisfy these ESG criteria. That's certainly one of them. Lawfare is part of it. Lawfare is every corporation runs by HR. They're terrified. Terrified of lawsuits. They're terrified of being drugged into a courtroom. By the way, that works both ways. We saw this week that Starbucks lost a $25 million lawsuit for firing someone because they're white. So lawfare can work both ways. But really what I think it is, Pete, is I think it's just the squeaky wheel effect. I think that radical minorities have the ability to bend others to their will through the power of fear. And fear, as we learned during the pandemic, I think is the most powerful human motivation.
I think it was remarkable that as many protesters showed up. I think that was really an important symbol. These are largely Hispanic, by the way, protesters. This is so deeply offensive to them. I think it's really important that we understand exactly what they're protesting. This is a group who does reenactments.
Yeah, let's not show them. We saw them once.
We don't need to show, but we need to tell it because we need to understand that this isn't just a group of, you know, Catholics or Christians who don't like drag shows.
Totally.
This is not what we're talking about. They have done reenactments of the crucifixion using the crucifix or the cross as a pole dancing device. This is absolutely some of the most egregious, blasphemous stuff you've ever seen. This group is on purpose trying to offend, Christians, and also I believe that, along with, all the ESG things that you talked about, Will, that they chose baseball, this active minority, for a reason. It is on purpose. It is deliberate. They want to tear down everything good in our country. So baseball represents family and hot dogs and apple pie. It is the basis of who we are. And if they could infect it with their fetishes, then that's a win for them. And they're willing to do that. Here's Trevor. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, the key point is it was intended to be offensive. You can make a statement about who you are without having to turn on Catholics and Christians and making fun of the holiest symbols in as grotesque a way possible. Some players have spoken out, as you were about to point out, and you better be a good pitcher or a good player if you're going to speak out. Otherwise, as we've seen, the team will let you go or cut you. Here's a good pitcher from the Washington Nationals, Trevor Williams, talking about why this is so offensive. Watch.
I looked at the Dodgers code of conduct, I'm like, look, or the Dodgers fan code of conduct, and it said you cannot wear anything or say anything that goes against anybody's age, gender, creed, religion. And at that point, it was like, this is going against their code of conduct. It's a blatant anti-Catholic message that they're sending, regardless of how much, quote unquote, good they've been doing in their community. But when I saw how deeply offensive it was, doing awful things to the cross, doing awful things about Stations of the Cross, like it became a point where these negatives are not, they shouldn't be honored, and they shouldn't mock a certain group. Anyone with two eyes and a brain can see that they're mocking the religious habits of nuns. They're mocking what we hold most deeply, and what are our core convictions. They're blatantly mocking it.
I mean, we're watching this, and we've seen it earlier in the morning, and every time we see it, it never ceases to shock.
And we're debating it. Should we show it? Should we not show it?
I said during that, I think you should show it, because I think it's impossible to understand exactly what they're doing. We can say it in our words so many ways. It's like the 9/11 footage. I think it's important you continue to show it. People have to see what we're talking about.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And again, I think that I get so upset seeing it. But this isn't about human rights. This isn't about, tolerance. The people out there protesting are tolerant. They're Los Angelinos who are, accustomed to, an alternative lifestyle amongst them. That's not what they're complaining about. They're complaining, they're upset, they're horrified by what you just saw on your screen there. And I can't tell you how many gay men I am friends with who have called me over the last week to say, I'm embarrassed, not just of this drag show thing, but everything that's happening on Pride Month. To assume that every single gay person likes what we're seeing in Pride Month is false. In fact, one of my gay friends, Pete, his name happens to be Pete, said to me, I don't see it as a month of pride. I see it as a month of shame. This is not what I wanted. He says, I just wanted to be accepted like everybody else. I want our, bedroom practices and bedroom practices. Enough of all of this displaying fetishes and all of this stuff and kink in public. Why?
I heard similar things. I'm working on a project about the military, how it went in this direction, of gay soldiers who wanted to be allowed to openly serve in the military. That's what we wanted. We didn't sign up for gender reassignment surgeries inside infantry battalions. So those that are radical activists, the loudest voice in the room, take advantage of earnest attempts to include somebody and turn it into an agenda. We'll see what happens with the Dodgers. We'll see what happens with Major League Baseball. In the NFL with the kneeling thing, there was a small dip for them temporarily. We'll see if attendance changes for the LA Dodgers. But there have been other companies that have been directly and massively impacted by their consumers and customers saying, we don't want to buy what you're trying to ram down our throat at this point. And the key example of that is Anheuser-Busch and Bud Light, as well as Target and Kohl's. And the whole adage of go woke, go broke has become pretty true. They've lost a collectively $28.7 billion in stock price. And I think this is just the leading end, because when it comes to Bud Light, you can paper over how much you're selling and your distributors and the supply. But when you talk to bar owners and liquor store owners, many of which I've talked to, they can't give it away. And so this may still be the front end of what they're affected by. So
Anheuser-Busch has been really quiet since this entire thing went down. That was until very recently they put out a statement. Pete, you brought up something that's not going to be in what I read to you. I'm going to read to you a selection of their statement, but one of the things they did address in there is how do we make, of course, it's funny how everyone uses language to exactly curry the most possible favor. We're going to figure out how to help our frontline employees. That's taken on a whole new meaning now. Frontline employees over the last couple of years. But talked about their wholesalers. How do we make our wholesalers whole? They know how many people in the economic food chain have been hurt by this campaign and the ensuing boycott. So here's a portion of what they had to say. It's Brendan Whitworth. He's the CEO of Anheuser-Busch. He said, to all our valued consumers, we hear you. Our summer advertising launches next week, and you can look forward to Bud Light reinforcing what you've always loved about our brand. That is, it's easy to drink and easy to enjoy. I found the most interesting part of that statement. We got to figure out a way to make our wholesalers whole, because everyone's lost a ton of money and we're in trouble.
Not going to work.
And when they switched beers away from Bud Light, did any of, I'd be curious to know if any of them switched to other brands that are owned by Anheuser-Busch. Have they? Anheuser-Busch
is a behemoth.
Owns a lot of brands.
Yeah. It's really hard for a consumer to know whether. Pete and I have told this story on more than one occasion. We went to a Yankees game together, and we didn't want to drink Bud Light, so we ordered another beer. only to find out a couple days later that beer was also owned by Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's almost a one brand type boycott because of how. But it's not hard to find. And by the way, part of the reason we're talking about this is the CEO of Anheuser-Busch plans to go on a summer tour to listen to consumers. So I wonder if this will be a highly curated corporate C-suite. Let's bring in the 7 people from St. Louis who are a little agitated but open to Bud Light. Or are they going to go talk to the actual go to a construction site in Texas or Tennessee or Michigan and ask a bunch of dudes there how they feel about Bud Light? That would be a real.
I have a friend that called me last week.
Yeah.
He said he was in a fishing tournament in Alabama, and he goes, "Man, he was just shocked." He's like, coolers and coolers full of Bud Light that no one would touch.
That's amazing. Well, Victor Davis Hanson has been saying, listen, this is really important that conservatives are fighting back, pushing back. But he says the reason why this one is effective versus in the past, conservatives have wanted to boycott. We're not as good at groupthink like the left, so they just haven't worked in the past. But this time it has. And he says the reason is that this time what we're seeing is civilizational, that this is existential. Listen.
This is a whole new dimension. And I think almost collectively, people are saying it's not enough to turn off the Oscars or not watch the NBA anymore, or don't go to the first-run movies in a theater. You can't. That has to be more than that, because if we don't strike back, if we don't push back, these people are nihilists, anarchists, and they're going to destroy the very basis of our civilization. If you can't go to a university and have grades based on merit or admission, then the whole system collapses. I think almost collectively, spontaneously, insidiously, people kind of woke up. Maybe a conservative dragon woke up. They poked it so much, and they said, you know what? We've got to get involved. We don't like boycotting, but we're going to boycott.
Yeah. I think he's right, but the real reason it's been successful is that it's so easy.
Right, you don't have to say anything. You just have to not buy.
Of all time. Just not buy. Just move your hand over to the different color can. That's the easiest. And
that tastes pretty much the same.
And, yeah, exactly. It's not as if you're like jonesing for Bud Light because of the taste.
When he said that, you can't go to university and know that your grade is based on the amount of work that you did. He also said you can't. Now we get onto a plane and we wonder, is this an affirmative action pilot, or is this, the best pilot? And so these are really important things that people are thinking about. And he's right. It's going to take more than that. But you're also right, Pete. This was a quiet vote. No one has to know. It's not public whether you bought Bud Light or not.
The Target one is even more interesting at some level because there's a lot of people that have been going to Target for a very long time, and it's convenient for them.
I just
made that change.
One of my best friends has a daughter getting married, and they were registered at Target. They took their registry out. Good for them. All right.